Hi, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. Just want to say happy Friday to everybody and say thank you to everybody for joining today's session. There was a fair amount of people that have signed up for this session, and it also seems like a fair amount of new people. So, thank you to those of you who are joining these sessions for the first time, and thank you as always for those that are regular attendees of these sessions. So, this today is the advanced session. Let me move my screen along. The advanced session for the Geopath's out of home office hours. I'm Scott Fiaschetti from Geopath. With me on the call today is also Brian Shopper of Geopath and AJ Chaffee of Geopath. Just want to give them a chance to say hi and hello as well. You guys there?
Hi, everyone.
Hey, AJ and Brian joining here as well too. And Brian will drive a lot, as always. If you've been on these sessions, Brian will drive a lot of the walkthrough today as well. So you'll be hearing from him in a moment as well. One thing to note, and probably like a lot of you all, we are working from home. Geopath is. So apologies if there's any technical difficulties or clunkiness in switching screens, et cetera. Just ask for your forgiveness up front, and we apologize up front if there's anything like that that happens. We did this yesterday for the foundational session. Things seem to go okay, so hopefully we'll have the same luck today. And again, given that there are a number of new people on these sessions today, I just want to give a lay of the land. So if you've never joined these sessions, typically what we do these every month, a foundational session and an advanced, what we call our advanced session. So the foundational session typically focuses on the Insight Suite very specifically, how to use it, because we know a lot of our members, that's how they're accessing the Geopath Insights. So we want to make sure everybody's aware of the changes that are occurring and just how to use the Insight Suite overall. Typically with the advanced sessions, we, over the past year, have been using those to really just talk about the data and the insights you can derive from the data and how to use that data to help solve clients' problems. You know, what we've been doing is inviting a member on, and we've been doing a use case with them and really focusing on like a real life situation and how they use the data to solve that. Last month and this month, we've changed the advanced level because we know that as we want to make sure everybody is moving their workflow and knows how to move their workflow from the legacy tools, so ADS and O-Plan, into the Insight Suite. So that's why we got a lot of good feedback on that, and we're getting a lot of questions, and we felt like that would be a good advanced session to really help people again move their workflow from the old tools to the new tools. And so that's what today is going to be about. Brian will walk us through, and we'll focus a lot on the workspace because that's where a lot of the functionality that you previously found in ADS and O-Plan is where you'll find that. And that part of the tool is evolving, and we'll talk more about what's going to be changing in that as well near the end of the session. But we also wanted to make sure people in the interim are able to, as I've said a couple times probably already on this call, just able to move those workflows over. Throughout the session, if you do have questions, please reach out. Use the question and answer widget. We try to answer them in real time. Sometimes we answer you directly. Sometimes we broadcast it to the whole webinar. And but we do want to make sure everybody's questions are answered as quickly as possible and as kind of in real time as possible. So we do try to pause and answer them in the moment as much as we can. I think that's it for the housekeeping stuff. The other thing I typically do is, we do walk through a deck, and I'll talk about some of the changes. So if you didn't join yesterday, you can at least get a sense of some of the changes that have occurred in the Insight Suite, and then I'll hand it off to Brian and we'll do our walkthrough. But again, as I've said already, the goal is to kind of help show how you can move your workflow over. I do want to pause. Brian, AJ, any questions that have come up just in the intro?
Not yet, Scott.
Okay, great, thanks. Great. Cool. Let me just double check. Is somebody? I just got a note. Is somebody having trouble with the audio? If you can just throw a note in the Q&A and we could try to help you out. Okay. Okay, cool. So some of the other changes that have happened, just broader changes to the Insight Suite overall are, oops, sorry about that. Let me go back one page, apologies. Are the ability now to look at, when you enter into the Insight Suite and in the Explore module, previously you would have to narrow and filter down to, I believe the limit was 50,000 before this right rail would show up with units. Now that has been taken away, so you can use that to really look at all the inventory overall, and it would start to show you, just populate from whatever you're sorting by. So this example here in the screenshot looks like it's sorting by target count percent, but you can look at target impressions, total impressions, etc. And you can now look at all of your inventory, or if you're, or look at a whole DMA, see what units are popping up at the top for those. So it gives you a little more flexibility in when you're exploring and looking at inventory. The other another big change was in the and you'll see today as we talk about this was a question that people were asking for a bit, and we're excited that this is now happening. You can go beyond the templated 1, 2, 4, 8, and 12 weeks. So you can create custom spots, schedules for your overall plan, but also for individual units as well now. Then also, let me just pause one moment. I'm seeing some chats here. I want to make sure everybody is not having technical difficulties. I do apologize. Oh, okay, good, great. Seems like everything's good. Great. Cool. So the other thing, and here's just another screenshot, which we'll look at today, where you can see how you're looking at the individual units and setting up individual spot schedules for those. Another thing that Brian will show you today is also the ability to download. You can either do this by downloading the CSV template that's available within the tool, but also the ability to just import a whole plan through a CSV versus just copying and pasting Geopath IDs or plant IDs into the tool as well. So this hopefully makes importing a set of inventory even that much easier into the tool. So those were some of the high-level changes over the course of the last several weeks. I do want to pause and hand it off to Brian right now, and he'll do kind of a walkthrough, and we'll all be jumping in just to help with some tips and tricks on, like we said, how to move your workflow over to the Insight Suite. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Brian will take over the screen right now, and we'll go from there.
All right, great. Hopefully everyone can hear me. And as Scott mentioned earlier, apologies if there are any technical issues or anything. We're all doing this a bit differently than we have been, as you might imagine. So hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Yeah, so we have a couple scenarios that I want to run through today. And as Scott mentioned, the whole point is to really help people understand how can I do things that I was able to do in the legacy tools in the Insight Suite. And I'm going to run through, I think I have about 4 different scenarios sort of set aside that show a couple different things that I think are really useful, just tips that people have questions on kind of a lot and that people use kind of often. So yeah, and if there's anything as we're going through, any questions you have about how to do a certain thing, or if there's something I go over that you want some more clarification on, as we've been saying, please reach out in the questions widget of the Zoom app. But yeah, so let me head over to the workspace. We're not going to spend a terrible amount of time really anywhere else. Most of what we're going to be spending our time today in is the workspace module itself. And just to this might be something you've heard a few times before, but I just want to say it again. In the workspace module, a market plan is where mostly the O-plan functionality has gone, and an inventory plan is where the ADS functionality has gone. So if you're trying to sort of, equate workflows from the past to present, and you're looking for how to do things that you could do in those tools, this would be a good place to start. But a lot of that functionality is also wrapped up in the Explore module as well. So, but just putting it pretty simply, market plan is the evolution of O-plan, and inventory plan is the evolution of ADS. Before I jump in and start to do some scenarios, I always like to talk about just a little bit of the layout of the workspace module, because it it's it's intentionally given some wiggle room here in its structure so you can make it work for your own workflows. But I just want to explain what we have in front of us and how you can go about, navigating projects and scenarios and things like that. So when you first click on the workspace module, as I've just done here, you're looking at all of your projects laid out. So that's what we're seeing here. Each of these white boxes is one of my projects, all my past projects here. I think I actually made one for today's, if I can find it. I made one for today's March webinar session 2. So now I'm looking inside of a project itself. You can see scenarios 1. I have one scenario here so far. And the way that the structure of the workspace module works is that, like I was showing you, we have all these projects, but then within the projects, we have different scenarios. And you can have both or either a market plan or an inventory plan in a scenario. But just so you know how the structure works. And one of the examples I always like to show, let me see if I can find it here. I have this Caribou Coffee project here. And then within that, my 2 scenarios are fall and winter campaigns. Or if you were maybe doing like a Toyota campaign or something, maybe Toyota would be the whole project, and a couple different scenarios that you were contemplating might be the different scenarios within. So
Right.
there's a lot of different things that you could do.
Or also too, another way to think about it too, it's like maybe it's the project is the Caribou Coffee fall campaign, and you're trying different scenarios. Could be this is the New York, Chicago, Minneapolis. In each one of those are different scenarios, or the scenarios could be around different packages that you typically put together. So again, to Brian's point, it's really about how you like to work and kind of the flexibility of how you often think about projects with clients. So.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah, and that's really kind of, in a larger sense, the entire sort of point of the design of the Insight Suite is that there isn't a necessary path that you have to take to get to any one answer. It's a very fluid program to use, and there's a lot of different ways that you can approach the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wanted to sort of, before we jumped into anything, I just wanted to explain that a little bit. But let me just start. I want to start with a new market plan. I'm going to come down to the scenario that the project that I made for this March out of home office hours session 2. I have another scenario in here that I'm going to work with in a little bit, but I want to make a new market plan. So to do that, I can hit new market plan up here, and scenario name, we can name it whatever we want. This one's going to be in the Atlanta market, so I'll just call it Atlanta, and create scenario. And you can also give it a description right there if you wanted to. But once you get within the scenario itself, you can see the titles up here. If you hit the little pencil icon, you can also add a description here. You can add some tags. So you can edit it once you get into the scenario. I'm going to do just a basic market plan to start, and we'll do a few different other examples of different things you can do. But just for anybody who is a little rusty on this or hasn't seen this too much yet, or maybe who wanted some more from yesterday, if you were on yesterday's session, I'm just going to do a basic market plan at first, sort of talk through what each of the things mean, and then we'll go through and we'll do some more in-depth workflows here. But so the way that you fill out a market plan, or rather, let me start with the actual purpose of the market plan. So in our legacy tool, OPlan, OPlan was a market averages and a market exploration tool. And market plan is an exploration tool in that same spirit. And so basically what you need to enter in a market plan is just, you really don't have to enter that much here. You could kind of run a market plan based on what's already here. But in the market plan setup here, you could start out with just a market and a media type, and then all you would need to know is those things. And this would tell you basically how many units you'll need to reach a goal of your choosing. So the 3 different goals that we have in the market plan right now that you can plan against are TRP plan goal. And just to clarify before I go through these are all for the entire plan. So even if it's a 4-week campaign length, if your entire plan goal is 25 TRPs, then you would put in 25 here for the entire plan. So you have TRP goal, we have an in-market impression plan goal, or a reach percentage plan goal. And I'll use a couple of these today, but So let me just start with a scenario, and you can see how you fill this in. I always start in the top left-hand corner and then just work my way across and then down. So for this one, I just want to keep it really simple. We're going to look in the Atlanta market, like I mentioned, Atlanta, and then my audience, I will do persons 18 plus, which I think I have in my saved audiences. But for anybody who wants a little bit, excuse me, a little bit of a refresher. Sorry, 1 second. I'm trying to. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so the audience selection tool here is actually the same as it is in the Explore module. If you're familiar with the way it looks, it's broken out into 3 categories: population, consumer profiles, and Prism Premium segments. And population, I'm going to be using a couple times today, but that's largely census level and in line with our legacy data. So age breakdowns, other demographics, ethnicity, race, household income. So there's a lot of things in the population category. Consumer profiles is spending behavior largely, intent to buy, behaviors, things like that. And then Prism Premier is all of these audiences are through our partners at Claritas. And Prism Premier is Claritas's segmentation product. So each household in the US, they break out into one of 68 different audience segments, and they group them similarly based on socioeconomic and cultural things. So that's just if you have a good idea, or if you have like an idea of the kind of people you want to target, this is always a good spot. I just wanted to do a quick overview of that to anybody who might not be familiar. So again, for this one, I'm just going to do 18 plus. So we'll select 18 plus.
And just as you're doing that, a couple of things that I'll try to do throughout the session is, talk about some of the things you could have done in ADS or OPlan per se, and just how you would do that now. So one thing to note as you're doing audience, right? Previously, the audiences were, the universe audiences were 18 plus or 5 plus. And those, as Brian's shown you, those are still available, but just note to the base audience for the tool is 0 plus. So that'd be one thing to pay attention to make sure if you don't want to run the plan with 0 plus that you are changing that as well. And also too, I think another question we often get are something that was able to be done in some of the older tools, are the ability to combine markets or create a custom market rather.
Oh yeah.
We'll do that in the tool, and we'll talk about how you do that. And we often get a question like, well, how do I save it? I know a lot of times people want to do this. If they're working in New York City, they want to combine the 5 boroughs as a custom market. And you can do that. And you may just want to save that as a templated project. And again, we'll probably talk about that a little bit later as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely show how to do that. Yeah, that was a great point. So anytime in the tool, just as a good thing to keep in mind, anytime you see total audience or total impressions, as Scott mentioned, the total's always against person 0 plus. So just to keep that in mind. Okay, so back to my scenario here. I've set up Atlanta, Georgia as my market, 18 plus as my audience. I'm going to leave all operators who have inventory in the DMA. And now my market or my media type, I'm going to do just posters. We'll do posters. So this one, like I said, I just want to keep this a pretty basic example so I can talk through it. And then down here we have some threshold filters. So say you only wanted units that got above a certain target impression range or above a certain composition index. So you can use these sliders to set minimum or maximum values as well. So for my plan goal, I'm going to say TRPs. Let's do TRPs. Why not? 25. It's always what I use as my example anyway. I'll leave my plan as 1 week. Effective reach will leave as 1. Allocation, I'll leave that as it is. And now I'm just going to hit generate plans. And so what this will do, and you'll see when I do another example of this with some more elements, how you can sort of sift through different markets and different audiences. But here we're just looking one audience, one market. So we can see person 0 plus is my audience, Atlanta, Georgia. My TRP goal was 25. So we can see we've got my 25 TRP goal. And so now if you expand the plan itself, what this is telling me is that I'll need 24 posters in this market to reach 25 TRPs against 18 plus. So that's what you're seeing here. If I were to put a reach goal of 15% or something, this would be a different number because it would be I've got 7.12% reach right now. It would be a much higher number of required spots. And you could plan on that if I wanted to. I could go and plan on reach goal, or I could plan on target impressions. But basically what this is just telling you is that you would need about 24 posters in the Atlanta market to get 25 TRPs against person 18 plus. If you click this operators dropdown over here, it'll show you the operators who have posters in that market, or whatever your media type is. For me, it was posters. And so that's just kind of a basic walkthrough of a really basic market plan. But so I'm just going to hit save scenario, and we'll kind of abandon this one. We'll come back to another one. I'm going to go back to my project, and let's do one that's got a little bit more involved with it. So this one is to sort of set the scene. Say there were an up and coming fashion brand or something like that, and they were looking at one audience and considering 5 different markets spread throughout the US, and they wanted to see, what would I need to get the same goal in these different markets? How would I explore different markets at once? Well, let's do that right here. So I'm going to start a new market plan. We can just call this one fashion brand. Oops, hold on. Fashion brand. Okay, so for this one, my markets, I'm going to set up, we want New York, Los Angeles, I'll do Atlanta again. I also wanted Chicago, and I had Dallas as my other one. And so Scott actually mentioned just a couple minutes ago, one of the questions we get a lot is, how can I make a custom market? This might not be a great example because these are geographically pretty spread out, but if you wanted to add a bunch of markets as a grouped market, you could do that. So if you select all of them, like I have my 5 here selected, and then you hit add as group, it will group those together and make one market as a whole. So this is really helpful if you're doing ones, this is especially helpful if you're doing ones that are geographically adjacent to each other, or if you're, if you have a couple counties that you want to put together to make sort of a subset of like a CBSA or a DMA or something. That's where you would really have a lot of usefulness for this. But yeah, so if you wanted to add this as a group, I could do that, but I want these 5 markets individually, so I'm going to hit add as individual.
And just as a little tip and trick, if it's something where, and as you've shown, it's fairly easy to go through and click on multiple markets and combine them. But if you don't want to have to go through that every single time, you can just set up this scenario, maybe call it, the 5 boroughs of New York, and every time you come into it, it's always set up, and you could copy that, you can duplicate that project so you don't, write over it or anything like that. And you could continually use that. And so you can set up little templated projects to start from all the time if you want. And
Definitely.
That's a good example of something of a custom market that you may not want to always have to set up, and you could use that and start from that scenario all the time.
Yeah, totally. And I can show how to do that really quick at the end too. Actually, I think the scenario I have coming up after this, it doesn't quite have to do with that, but you'll get the idea. I'll show something about how to use a standard set of something in your project that you duplicate and start fresh with. So I'll show you how to make like a template project for something. Okay, so I've got my 5 markets. For this one, let's do a little bit more of a combined audience for this one. So I'm going to go to population, demographics. So I'll start with age. I wanted 18 to 34 for this one. And for this one, the fashion brand in this example, maybe they wanted males 18 to 34. So let's see, males 18 to 34. So you can see I've got my 2 selected right here. Just as an aside, anytime you have one of the population variables that you have selected and it ends up in this box at the bottom, if you see additional categories up here that you can hover over, that means you can combine it with other things. So I've got my 2 combined here, but I could combine it with other things as well. Looks like I can do some income. Why not? Let's do income. No, I'll just leave it to this. But so we've got 18 to 34 male. I'll leave person 0+ just so we can see how it looks when you have a couple audiences. And then operator, again, I'm just going to look anyone in these markets. Media type, let's do posters again. Why not? I always like using posters. We'll do posters.
And just as you're doing that, Brian, sometimes we get a question of like combining audiences and which ones can you combine and why can't you on all of them. So we are working towards, the ability to combine more audiences. So right now, within the population aspect of the audiences is where you can combine. And just as a good rule of thumb to think about is if you could have combined it in ADS or O-Plan, those are the audiences that you're able to combine today so far in the Insight Suite. So there is definitely parity between ADS, O-Plan, and the Insight Suite. But again, we are working towards the ability to combine more.
Yeah, great question. I'm always glad when that one comes up because that's something we do get asked quite a lot. Okay, so just for my own sake, let's see. We got our markets, we've got our audiences, posters. Okay. So I'm gonna leave the thresholds as they are here. Let me set I'll use a reach goal this time. Let's do say 15% reach. Why not? And that's actually an interesting one because these are 5 very different markets. 15% reach in each of these markets would be a pretty big difference, I think, when we look at the actual plans. So let me hit generate plans. So this is actually Scott and I were on a call yesterday, and we were talking about something with the workspace module, and this was how we came up with this scenario to do for today. It was just something we kind of stumbled on that Scott thought would be a cool thing to go through, and I agree. It's a really interesting one to take a look at. Okay, so this last one's Dallas is still coming in, but when you have multiple markets in your market plan, they group them by line. So each market gets its own line here. And you can see I've got my person 0+ is what it defaulted to, but we can switch to our other audience here, and it'll just switch us over to those. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these results. So we've got 15% reach was my target for this one. So I wanted to reach 15% of the males 18 to 34 market in each of these markets. So let's take a look. Let's see how many we would need in New York. So we would need about 111 posters in New York, excuse me, to get this 15% reach against this audience. But I'm curious, in a place like LA, what would that be? 66 in this instance. Let's see, what about Atlanta? 46, Chicago, 68. Wow, Dallas, 38, a lot lower. And that's just an interesting way, and you don't have to go based on reach. You could go based on any of the other planning things that you wanted. Or say you were in here and you were curious, like in Atlanta, say I wanted to change this and I wanted 100 TRPs instead. This is kind of you could do things like this in O-Plan before where you could kind of type in and readjust some of the numbers on the fly like that. So to get at least my 100 TRP plan goal, I'd need 80 posters in Atlanta to get that goal. And this is a pretty fluid part of the tool. So like I said, you can go in and say you were, for example, if you had 2 different media types in a market and you were trying to reach your goal, you could reallocate how many spots of each you wanted. So, say it gave you 40 posters and 40 transit shelters to get to your goal, you could switch it and make it 80 and 0 and get to your goal that way. So there's a lot that you can do with this. You can type in things to sort of fine tune what you're trying to plan for here.
There's something just in that view right there that you have, Brian.
Yep.
I find this really interesting. Oh no, if you
Oh,
close.
sorry.
If you close that.
Yep.
Just this view, right? You can see like, okay, I have the same reach goal across. I know you've changed it,
Yeah.
but I have the same reach goal. But then you could see how that impacts the media weight across the market, so the TRPs. So what that means across different markets, all in one view. That was the thing that I was struck by when we were working through our scenario that I hadn't done before. And I thought was really helpful and probably an interesting view to look at, and as you're starting to plan.
Yeah, I was just trying to get it back to that original view with the numbers as normal. Here we go. Yeah, so you're right. It totally is. It shows you completely different things about each market, especially the reach net, like you were saying. The number of individual people, the difference is crazy. Yeah, and it just really speaks about the markets themselves and the different characteristics of those markets. Okay, so that was the other market plan scenario that I wanted to run through. And there's a lot that you can do with market plan, and there will be a lot more. There's going to be a pretty big change coming in the near future to workspace as a whole. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but let me go back and I'll do some more scenarios because there's a few other things that I wanted to walk through today that I think are really helpful. So let's see, what did we have? Fashion brand, Atlanta. So let me make, just out of, because Scott mentioned it, let me make a new inventory plan. So this one, we'll just call this, let's see, custom counties. We'll call it something like that. So as Scott was mentioning, you know, if you have like a custom market that you want to work with often and that you would use a lot, there's a couple different ways that you can do that. The reason that I chose inventory plan is just because in my head, like a real life scenario might be, you know, I have these 5 counties that I always want to run these boards against, but you know, I'm not necessarily trying to explore the market. I know the market. I just want to run against these 5 counties, so I'm going to keep those here all the time. So let's just do that. Let me go to count. Let's see. I'll do the ones I did in my scenario yesterday. So I had, for this one, I had it was Cook County in Illinois, where Chicago is, and then it was DuPage County, and then Will County. Okay, so I had these 3 counties selected. So I'm going to hit add as group. So I've got my combined markets. You can see I've got each of them here. I can look at them individually if I wanted by clicking, but I've got them combined here as my combined market. So really all I would need to do, if I just hit save scenario, now this is saved as a custom, you know, a custom market of these 3 counties. And so if I wanted to, say I filled out the rest of that, I did a full inventory plan, I ran a report and all that, I could go and just come over here to this little spillover menu here and hit duplicate scenario, and then I could just call it you know, Isle County's template or something. Oops, sorry. But so basically, if you had like a custom group of you know, a custom market or anything like that, this would be a really easy way to just duplicate it and always keep a template of it on hand. So, oh, it opened it up for me. Oops, hold on. Let me get back to my project so we can take a look at that. But basically, that would be one way that you could go about doing that is, you know, if you make your custom market, then just go and duplicate the scenario itself, and you can make one of them the template, which I did here. And so the same could be said, this actually perfectly transitions into the next thing I was going to talk about. The same could be said if you have like a set of units that you use often, like a perm set, you know, maybe it's this one, this Charlotte perms, I called it. It was 8 bulletins that I'm going to use as a package all the time. You know, these bulletins are never not packaged together. So, you know, maybe I just want to keep them like that as a template. So I have this template. I've got these 8 here. I don't have a market set up or anything like that, but you can see I've got my, I've got the scenario itself with those loaded into it. And just like we did for the custom market, if I went to duplicate scenario, we could call this, you know, Charlotte bulletin package. And then this could just be another template that I just keep on hand all the time. So there's a lot that you can actually do to sort of set things aside for yourself or set yourself up for like future use. Just little tricks like that, you know, you might not think of right away. So I'll just go back to the full list so you can see. So we've got, you know, the bulletin package here that I duplicated with those 8 units. We've got my Illinois counties template that I duplicated. So there's a lot that you can do just with duplication and sort of keeping one thing in there. A good thing to note always, if you're going to do something like that, just hit save scenario while you're within the scenario itself. That's always a good practice to have, just to have everything saved up to your most recent work. So let me hop into this. Let me make a new market or inventory plan, I suppose.
And Brian, just as you're doing that, there was a question that came in about the ability to map the inventory when you're in these tools. So,
oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we can point that out as we're building this scenario.
Sure.
But also know that that functionality is actually going to be expanding and be even a little bit more easier to use as we kind of launch the Workspace 2.0 in the coming week or so.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm making myself a new inventory plan here. This one's called Charlotte QSR Bulletins. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do 2 scenarios and highlight a new feature that's in here that is a really big deal that we've been really excited for and really eagerly awaiting the addition of it. And it's this feature right here, this little switch, this spot schedule switch. And let me just fill my way over left to right. And when I get to that, I'll click on it. But so for this one, I'm going to be doing an example in Charlotte. So, oops, let me do Charlotte first. I always like to do market first. It doesn't need to be in any order necessarily. It's just a preference thing. So Charlotte, and then my market was just simple, just 18 plus. And so now that we're here, so the before we had this group of 5 different week denominations that you could choose from for the campaign length. But now if you switch this little spot schedule switch, we now have the ability to do exact start and end dates for a campaign. And even beyond that, just specific start and end dates for specific units within a campaign or spots within a campaign. And I'll show that when I get a little bit further down. So let's say this one starts, this Sunday and ends next Sunday. There we go. So we've got our start and end dates here. Custom goals. So whenever you're doing an inventory plan like this, the add custom goal feature is just a place for you to keep notes of what maybe what the RFP said or what you were looking for as your goals for this. So if I wanted this one, maybe I wanted like a 50 TRP or something. I'll just put that in there for my own record. It doesn't affect anything else. It's just so you can see it. So I'm going to add some inventory to this inventory set. And just as a brief kind of distinction between inventory plan and market plan, like I said earlier, market plan is much more for market exploration and really getting a sense of the market as a whole. An inventory plan, been stuck inside for a while. An inventory plan is really helpful when you actually have a set of inventory that you want to evaluate. You actually have, a specific group of units that you're already looking at, that you're already considering, and you want to just go for those and run some numbers on that. So less exploratory and more just, actually running the scenario itself. So there are a couple different ways now that we can upload inventory or that we can actually add inventory. For this example, I'm going to do the do way that we could in the past, and I'll show this upload CSV in my next example. But so when you hit add inventory, you're given 3 options down here. You can either paste in Geopath spot IDs, you can paste in operator spot IDs, or you can load one of your saved inventory sets, and you can search through them here. So I have one that's, let me find it. Here we go, Charlotte QSR bulletins. So hit add selected. And so these are just some bulletins in Charlotte that I was taking a look at for this example. Now that I have these loaded in, these numbers are about to generate right here once this keeps loading. Yeah, it's just loading the rest of the numbers. Actually, let me hit save scenario. Sometimes that helps. But once you get your numbers loaded, or once you get your units loaded in, like I just pulled in from an inventory set, yeah, I can see this is starting to calculate. You'll have, hold on, it's taking it. Oh, you know what? Hold on, try that. I think I did something wrong. My home Wi-Fi has also been very strange. But basically, when you add in your inventory set, then you have the ability to look at all the units in the, I guess it's not doing the numbers for whatever reason, but we'll work around it. So you can see I've got 8 different bulletins in here. When you get to this point, you can deselect any of the ones that you want. You can remove them from your inventory set or from your plan. You can also go and, if you go into the explore module and you explore around, you can actually add other units into existing inventory sets. So if I wanted to add different bulletins, I could go do that and then put them into here. But let me just scroll over. So you have the ability to do a start and end date. Oh, it should have carried over, but you have the ability to do a start and end date for each individual spot now, which is a huge deal and something that people have been asking for a while, just because it gives you a real, granular ability to plan and get really precise with everything. Yeah, so that's one way that you can run it, and you can upload your inventory just from a either saved inventory set or from spot IDs. But let me show another way. Let me go back here and save the scenario again.
And again, Brian, as you're doing that and crossing over, another question that we often get are just comparing back to the legacy tool. I know previously in ADS, you could copy and paste in inventory sets, but there was a max limit of 300 spots, whereas now in the Insight Suite you can go up to about 6,000 right now.
Yeah.
So hopefully that makes things a little easier too, as well as you're creating bigger campaigns or bigger scenarios. So
Definitely. Oh wow, I didn't realize I had made so many different scenarios for this for this project, but well, what's one more then? So we're gonna make another inventory plan now, and I'm gonna go about it a little bit of a different way, and highlight a different aspect of one of the new features, like I was just mentioning. So this one's gonna take place in Chicago. Um, yeah, just Chicago example. Okay. And so this one, I'm going to, we'll set my audience. This one is going to be females 25 to 54. I think I might have this in the saved audience, but let me just check. Yeah, I do. But I'm going to show how to make that anyway. So in population, I'll go demographics. Gender, we'll do female first. And then we will do the age, 25 to 54. And so I could hit save audience and it would put it in my saved audiences. I don't need to do that since I already have one. But just as kind of a little tip, if you're adding some variables together and you have made a custom audience, this is true in the Explore module as well. But if you click the little pencil icon, you can custom name these audiences to anything you want. So you can really name these anything that are more useful for you. But then they'll appear that way in your saved audiences. So let me just find that one. Here we go. Oh no, not that one. It was this one. Okay, females 25 to 54. My market for this one's going to be Chicago DMA. And I'm gonna not touch this up here. I'm gonna upload it a different way. Let me see if I can. Oh, just let me pause for just a brief second. Hold on. Really quick. I just have to pull up the Excel sheet for this. Were there any other questions in the meantime?
Not yet.
Okay, here we go. I got it.
I think please definitely, if you do have questions as you're going through as well. One thing
Okay.
too, Brian, as you get into this and we look at the different columns of information and data that we can see, I think it'd be worthwhile talking about some of those because I know
Totally.
another question too that's often important when you are planning is the ability to look at CPP or CPM. And again, I just want to let everybody know that that is coming and scheduled to be in the tool by mid-April. So in the next handful of weeks, you should start to see that in there as well.
Okay, so I've got the Excel sheet I was looking for. So here it is. I just wanted to show what it was. So I've just got some spot IDs and a start and an end date. And this will make sense in just a second. But so I've got my audience set up. I've got my market set up. I'm not going to touch the scheduling up here, the spot, the campaign length or anything up here. I don't need a custom goal for this one. So now we're going to use the upload CSV feature, which is new as of fairly recently. So when you click the upload CSV button, this little drag and drop box pops up. And so you can see right here in this highlighted text, download the CSV template. Basically what you can do is just download a blank CSV and it only has 3 headers in it. It's got spot ID, start date, and end date. And so you don't need the CSV template. If your CSV that you're working in, or if you have an Excel file that you save as a CSV, as long as it has Geopath spot IDs and a start and an end date in there somewhere as columns, you can just map them out that way and use your own files. But so let me just show you. So I'm going to drag in the. Oh nope, I just downloaded. Hold on. Working off one laptop. Normally I have 2 screens for these webinars, so it's a little bit harder, but okay. So I've got my, so this is Chicago posters and transit shelters. And this is actually from the example I was doing yesterday. And so you can just drag in your CSV here and then hit upload. And what it'll do now on the next screen is it'll prompt you to match up the values, like match the headers. So like I said, spot ID, start date, and end date are all you really need. And since I'm uploading a file that I filled out in the template, it'll match perfectly. But again, as long as you have those 3 columns, you should be fine. Okay, and it wants me to just confirm my market here. Yes. Okay. So this is going to start loading in now. So you can see I've got 100 spots here. Again, this is a mix of posters and transit shelters. This will start coming in just a second. But you can see now we've got, we've got target impressions are person 0+. So this is the total impressions, target composition. Gives you a little bit of metrics up here. But like I said, you can check or uncheck, any of these from your plan in your report here that you want. Scott mentioned this a second ago, and this is a really good thing to bring up. When you're in here and you're looking at this report down here on the bottom that you filled out. So we have our totals here down at the bottom, these line totals. It's important to note that only the columns that appear here right now are what will export when you hit export. So if you want a column here, a different metric that's not showing, check out the customize columns button, because this has a ton of different metrics that are not in here by default. Everything including like zip code, Latin longs, so you can have the actual spatial and geographic data on them. But we've got a lot more audience metrics, a lot more sort of the qualities of the spots themselves, so you can get a full full rounded look at it. But anything that is not added here to your current view won't be exported. So just as an aside there. And speaking of exporting, so say I'm happy with everything I've done so far, I've got everything I need, and I'm ready to export. All I have to do is click the export scenario button and then export as CSV, and this will just start a download right for you. Yep, there it is. And I think it also names it whatever your scenario name is. And then actually there was one more question specifically about, can you map out the inventory that's in your scenario? You definitely can. And I think if you just hit that map scenario button, as long as you have inventory that you've added to your inventory plan, it should just map out whatever you have in there. So we'll just give this a second to catch up to us, but we should be looking at Chicago very shortly. We'll see. And it carries over, it's still loading, but it carries over the market and your audience as well. So it kind of auto filters to match whatever you had in your scenario. But it's still loading for me. Give it a second.
And just as you are waiting on that too, I did mention a bit earlier, Brian, about the max panels that you can add to it. Also, too, previously in ADS, there was a time max, which was 52 weeks, and now that's been expanded as well to, I believe, more than 2 years. So it's definitely much more than 52 weeks.
And as an aside, actually, I was in there yesterday taking a look at the sort of schedule, the start and end dates. And if you really wanted to, you could plan something up to 2039. So you can go quite a few years into the future for your plans if you really wanted to. But the option exists. So you can get really specific with whatever you're trying to do.
And can you also too, there was also a question that did come in about the, about the format of the when you're importing. Is there a specific format? Is it, do you have, what's the structure of that? And I just wondered if you can at some point go back to
Sure.
How it is, and I would mirror that format. That
here I can actually show this. So this was based on the template itself that I downloaded, and I just added in the Geopath spot IDs that I wanted and the start and end date that I wanted. But like I said, you could have 30 other columns here. As long as you somewhere in your columns in your CSV file have IDs and a start and an end date, you should be fine.
And I would put the full four digits for the year in.
Yeah. Yep.
There. So day, so month, day, year.
Yep. Were there any other questions? that we
Right
have
now,
coming?
that's the only one, and I know we're getting to the top of the hour, so if there's, you
Yeah,
can,
should I kick it back to you, Scott?
were there any other questions or anything else you wanted to cover?
I think I ran through all the scenarios. I think I've hit all the points I wanted to.
Okay, again, if anybody does have questions as we're at the last few slides or last few minutes in the session, please, don't hesitate to jump in and add them. I do want to jump back into the presentation deck. I just want to take some ownership of that. Sorry. And just share a few things as we're going through that. So, apologies. Okay, so I want to talk about Workspace 2.0 that's going to be released over the next kind of week or so. You'll probably start seeing changes as early as kind of early next week as well. So one of the things that I think is going to be a really nice addition or a nice change to it is when you're starting your projects, you can click this button here on the right that says add scenario. And what that will allow you to do is to not have to set up the audience and the market and et cetera and everything for the market plan and then do it again for the inventory plan. So you'd be able to do that for an entire plan, and it will cut across. And one thing you're seeing here is that you'll have, let me do this. So this is what you'll actually see show up this way. So you'll be able to set your plan period, your markets, your audience, if you want to specify operators, media types that you want. It'll also open up with a set of templated default things. So there'll be a default market, default audience, and also a default set of broader media types. And you could go in and change it. It was just to actually make it easier to go from starting a project to actually generating a report a lot more quickly. So you can do that. And also to here, this was just a really extreme use case to show you that you can click that pencil and be able to move around. So if there's certain things, if you think about things differently and have a different order you want to see the widgets in, you can do that as well. So you can do that. And then also another option too that you'll see coming into the across the Insight Suite, but very specifically in the workspace, is that you can do national audience. So it'll have a radio dot for that. So you can see here, we did blew that out, and you could see how it's showing up as national as the default there. So it'll be United States right now. And then also, again, this is typical of the tool today, but again, you could click across the different media market plan, inventory plan, and places fairly easily. You're also able to, again, apply those metrics that are appropriate across the market plan versus the inventory plan. And also too, as you set up your filters up here, as you bring in inventory, it's going to allow you to say, hey, I want to bring in inventory and apply those filters. Because maybe I have a collection of inventory that has New York inventory, Chicago inventory, and San Francisco, and I don't want to bother sorting it out. I just want to pull it in, but I want to apply those filters and just look at my Chicago inventory. So you can ultimately do that. And then another kind of further scenario down the line is it's also going to be able to sniff out and say, okay, I see you have inventory from New York, Chicago, and in Boston. Do you want to use those markets and just auto apply those markets? So you can just do that and then look at reports for your Boston inventory for your Boston market, your New York inventory for your New York market, and export that as a whole. So I know that was some functionality that was in ADS that is now coming into the Insight Suite as well. So the ability to kind of export multiple reports across markets at the same time is also coming. So again, that's what these screenshots are talking about. And also the mapping inventory, again, will be expanded as well. I know Brian just showed you that, but that's also going to be expanded a little bit more than what you're seeing today. So those are just a couple high-level things with the workspace. And we'll continue to update everybody on that. And because then we know the workspace module is going to ultimately be a really key space where you will ultimately probably start your workflow there versus probably when the Insight Suite launched. I think most people are probably going into the Explore module and really using that. But now that the workspace module is fully capable, I know that's probably where the workspace will start. So we want to make sure everybody's feeling comfortable with that. With that, I do want to pause and see if there are any other questions on anything that we've talked about today that maybe you didn't get a chance to ask, or just any broader questions. Feel free to type those in. But I do want to talk about, usually at this point of the webinar is where we talk about our upcoming sessions. And so what we typically do during the month of the conference is we actually take that month off from the webinars, and because there's a lot of training that happens at the conference, then we come back and get back on a regular schedule. But given the changes, you can see that first bullet there, that's kind of a notice we sent out last week, just how things are changing and that it's not going to take place in Phoenix, the Go 2020 conference. We are trying to explore what that really means, and trying to do something more virtually. So we will be in touch and kind of communicating out what that really means, but also to what that means for our training sessions, because we do want to still have some training sessions in the month of April, but just we'll reach back out in our newsletter with dates and times and kind of content for those as well during the session. As always, if you have colleagues who couldn't join this session, all of our out-of-home office hours are available on our website. This is a screenshot. You just go to geopath.org, go over to the Geek Out tab, which is highlighted, and scroll down, and you'll always see those 6 most recent as thumbnails, but then you can always see where it says click here. That'll take you to our YouTube channel that has all of our webinars and also a lot of other videos available as well. A lot of our training videos are there as well, but also all our training videos are available in our Learning Lab, and I do want to make a plug for that. So, potentially a lot of people are working from home these days. Hopefully, maybe you have a little more time, not having to commute. Maybe some of that commuting time could be used to go through the Learning Lab. We do recommend that. I think that's a great way to start to get comfortable with the Insight Suite. And again, it helps from the base level of knowledge on the Insight Suite. And then we're always happy to have one-on-ones or kind of group presentations individually with organizations as they have on their own specific questions. But I do want to make another plug for the Learning Lab right there. You just click on that button. It's our homepage of our website, and it'll take you right to it. Again, if you do have questions after the call, or if you ever need anything, you can always reach out to us at geekout@geopath.org. I do want to pause and just check with Brian and AJ, see if there were any other questions that came in.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining on Friday. There was a great turnout, so we really appreciate that. And again, please always reach out to us if you need anything. Geekout@geopath.org. And just want to say thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.